Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Is this on? Right now? Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. Welcome to Upaya, and welcome to everyone online. I know my teacher, Roshi Joan, is watching online. She's recovering from multiple heart surgeries, so please bear her in your thoughts. We hope her suffering ends soon and her recovery is complete and quick. It's Roshi's very diminished right now, as you can imagine, but one can still feel the energy, the abbot that holds this place together. So it's a great gift. It is a joy to be back here. It's a privilege to be invited to attend the Zen Circle and the brush workshop with Ka Sensei, and then following week we're going to do Dogen seminar, which I'm very much looking forward to. And just being in the practice with the residents is a great joy for me. So I'm very happy to be here. I have a couple of quick questions for you, just so I don't confuse everybody, which I'm bound to do anyway, but in an effort not to confuse it too much, how many people know who Dogen is? How many people do not? Okay. How many people know who Ryokan is? How many people do not? Okay. How many people know what Butoh is? How many do not? Great, we're all going to learn something. Okay. So Dogen is a 13th century Japanese Zen monk who was brought up in the Tendai school and was unsatisfied with his teachers, and decided that he could not find the answers to his questions. So he made this perilous journey to China, where he met his true teacher, practiced with him, received transmission with him, and brought his style of Buddhism back to Japan. And that is how Zen got planted, Soto Zen got planted in Japan. He lived between 1200 and 1252. He gave many talks, which you can find in a very thick book called The Record of Dogen. And he wrote an enormous book called the Shobo Genzo, which I spend almost all my time studying and teaching. Centuries after Dogen, Dogen's disciples in the Soto Shu came to America. And you probably heard of Suzuki Roshi and Mizumi Roshi. Mizumi Roshi's our lineage, White Pluma Sangha. And they came and they planted Dogen in America. Ryokan, for those of you who don't know, was a Soto Zen monk who lived many hundred years after Dogen. He was born in the 1700s, and he lived from 1758 to 1831. So there's a big period between 1252 and 1758. Dogen, as a monk, spent all of his life as a monastic. And the parts of his life that he didn't spend as a monastic, he spent walking from one monastery to another, which is also the practice of a monastic. Ryokan obviously was trained in a monastery because that's how things are done, but he spent his life as a solitary hermit beggar who practiced calligraphy and is famous for playing ball with children and hide and seek with children, and wrote many, many poems about playing with children. And so he's one of my favorite poets and one of my teacher's favorite poets. Ryokan was an amazing calligrapher, just an amazingly beautiful calligrapher. And for those of you who don't know what calligraphy is, we're doing this workshop this weekend. It is writing characters, and there are many different styles of this, one of which is called grass script, grass, as in grass blowing in the wind. And that's what it looks like. It is absolutely stunningly beautiful. And his grass script is just amazing. My father-in-law had this very old Taisho era reproduction of one of Ryokan's poems. And he gave it to my wife, and it hangs in our house. And that poem is the first poem I'm going to open up with tonight, which I wasn't even going to read, but my teacher, as soon as I told her about my talk, brought up the poem, and one does not like to disappoint one's host. So this is the first poem. On a somber spring evening around midnight, Rain mixed with snow sprinkled on the bamboos in the garden. I wanted to ease my loneliness, but it was quite impossible. My hand reached behind me for the record of Eihei Dogen. Beneath the open window at my desk, I offered incense, lit a lamp, and quietly read. Body and mind dropping away is simply the upright truth. In 1,000 postures, 10,000 appearances, a dragon toys with the jewel. His understanding beyond conditioned patterns cleans up the current corruptions. The ancient great master's style reflects the image of India. I remember the old days when I trained in Etsu Monastery and my late teacher lectured on the true Dharma I. At that time, there was an occasion to turn myself around, so I requested permission to read it, and I studied it intimately. I keenly felt that until then, I had merely depended on my own ability, and that after that, I left my teacher and wandered all over. Between Dogen and myself, what relationship is there? This has been the central question of my practice for the last 10 years. Between Dogen and myself, what relationship is there? Everywhere I went, I devotedly practiced the true Dharma I, arriving at the depths and arriving at the vehicle, how many times? Inside this teaching, others never any shortcoming. Thus, I studied the master of all things. Now when I take the record of Dogen and examine it, the tone does not harmonize well with usual beliefs. Nobody has asked whether it is a jewel or a pebble. For 500 years, it has been covered with dust. For 500 years, Dogen wasn't studied. His books were just bowed to like they were relics. For 500 years, it's been covered with dust, just because no one has an eye for recognizing Dharma. For whom was all this eloquence expounded? Longing for ancient times and grieving for the present, my heart is exhausted. One evening, sitting by the lamp, my tears wouldn't stop, and soaked into the records of the ancient Buddha Eihei. In the morning, the old man next door came to my thatched hut. He asked me why the book was damp. I wanted to speak, but I was so deeply embarrassed. Ever cried and been embarrassed? I was so deeply embarrassed, my mind deeply distressed, it was impossible to give an explanation. I dropped my head for a while and then found some words. Last night's rain leaked in and drenched my bookcase. So this weekend coming up, we'll be doing brush workshop, which aligns perfectly with Ryokan. And then the weekend after that, we will be doing this Dogen seminar. If you are, there's still room online. If you want to sign up, I really encourage you. It's going to be an amazing thing. It's Norman Fisher, Stephen Hine, who's just an amazing, amazing Dogen scholar, Kathy Fisher, the inestimable Katsuoku Tanahashi, and then, me. But the rest of the lineup is great. So I would really encourage you to come to that. At that seminar, I'm going to be talking about a fascicle, which is, there's this book called the Shobo Genzo. When he talked about the true Dharma I, that's what the Shobo Genzo is, this book called the true Dharma I. And the very last thing that Dogen wrote in that book, the very last fascicle, just before he died, was a riff on the last thing that the Buddha taught. And it's called Hachi Dainin Gaku. So Hachi just means 8, simple. Dai means great. Nin means person. So, and Gaku is, today means learning or study, but has in this context, it's translated sometimes as awareness, sometimes as awakening, sometimes it's understanding, like that. So different people will translate it in different ways, but it's essentially the 8 understandings of us, of great people. One teacher does a very different translation, which I like, which is the 8 understandings of adults. And I think a little bit more adulting would suit all of us well. So I like that translation of it. But anyway, it's 8 very simple points that Dogen is trying to teach us. And I really want to share those with you. And then I want to share how Ryokan lived those. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to read a little instruction from Dogen, and then I'm going to read a little piece of poetry from Ryokan. Now, this is why I brought up Butoh. For those of you who don't know, Butoh is a modern dance. It's a form of modern dance that was invented in the early 1950s in Japan. It is powerful, transformative, organic. It challenges stereotypes of all kinds, and it is a thoroughly transformative experience. And interestingly enough, it is, I think, could be safely said to be Japan's #1 countercultural export. Butoh is performed all around the world, and I would hazard to say there is more Butoh outside of Japan than there is inside of Japan. Although there is a large Butoh festival in Hokkaido, there's Butoh festivals all over the world. It's a powerful form of dance. If you have a computer and the internet, go onto YouTube, Google Butoh, and then, 10 or 12 hours later, you can regret you met me. Now, the one thing I wanted to say about the reason I'm talking about Butoh is I want you to look at this, think of this poetry. The title of this talk is Ryokan Dances Dogen. So this is like, one of the things that I really believe is that, essentially, when we drop all the nonsense, we're the cosmos dancing. That's what we're doing. There's one of my favorite pieces of Zen art is by Shoho and Shaku, and it's just a skeleton dancing. And it looks exactly like me, minus the flesh and bones and the ears. It's tall, skinny, and having a great time. And this is something I want you to remember is that we think about is that we are the cosmos dancing. We're stardust dancing. We're animated stardust. We are not separate from any of that. And Butoh is a dance, and Ryokan danced Dogen. His whole life was living the dance of Dogen. Now, dance has a particular vocabulary and a particular way of doing things, and that is often defined as choreography. So even if it's a simple waltz, left, up, left, back, left, up, left, back, a typical dance choreography might be something like walk across the floor in a straight line, keep your spine upright, engage your core, extend. That might be like a modern dance configuration. Butoh has choreography too. It's very specific. It's called Butoh Fu. And it's slightly different than traditional choreography. So for the same kind of activity, this would be the Butoh choreography for moving across the room. Your feet are swollen sacks of night. Your feet are swollen sacks of night. The earth pulls at your feet like an old lover. Each step is a forgetting. That is the instruction to the dancer. So when you hear the Ryokan poems, don't think of them as poems. Think of them as Butoh Fu, as instructions on how to dance. Okay? So the first awareness of great people, the first awareness of adults, first awareness of practitioners is to have a few desires. And I'll be talking about the paradox of this at the Dogen workshop is because I already have a whole bunch of desires, and now I have another one, which is to have fewer. But if you can't deal with paradox, you're going to have a difficult time being a Zen student. So Dogen tells us that people who have many desires suffer a great deal. And I think that's true. He says those who have few desires are without such troubles. And I think that's true. Ryokan says, now my body is like a drifting cloud. I ask for nothing. I want nothing. This floating life is enough. My body is like a drifting cloud. I ask for nothing. I want nothing. This floating life is enough. He simply needs less because he simply wants less. The next one is know how to be content. So I'm not saying that I've mastered any of these yet. So don't be looking at me like that. I haven't figured these out either. So this is for all of us. And Dogen says, those who know contentment are happy when even sleeping on the ground. Those who do not know contentment are still dissatisfied even when sleeping in a heavenly mansion. And that is so true. And we can see that in our world today. And so this idea of knowing what it is to be content, right? Alan Watts once said that nirvana is the situation you're in, so long as you're not objecting, right? So it's like, so the Butoh fu from Ryokan for this is winter wind. And I have no rice. But look how beautiful the snow is in the withered fields. Winter wind. I grew up in Saskatchewan where the wind moves at 37 miles an hour when it's 32 degrees below zero. So I have a particular Butoh fu about winter wind, but whatever it is, winter wind is cold and chilling and piercing. And he doesn't even have rice. But he can still be content because he can see the beauty of the snow. The third awareness is the ability to enjoy quietude. And Dogen tells us, if you want to have the joy of serene non-doing, you should stay away from crowds and stay alone in a quiet place. If you want to have the joy of serene non-doing, you should stay away from crowds and stay alone in a quiet place. So this idea of serene non-doing is one of the things that Chan, or Chinese Zen, inherited from Taoism. In Taoism, it's called Wu Wei. And Wu Wei is the idea of not doing, but it doesn't mean that you don't do anything. It just means you don't go against anything. So we might call it always being in the flow. It's action that is perfectly aligned with what is going on. So the wind is blowing and the bamboo bends. It's just aligning with what's going on. The water streams down a hill and comes to a big rock and just reroutes itself around it. No fuss, no muss, no complaint, no who put this rock here. Just this is a very aspirational kind of notice. If we can, I always say to my students that the one question that Zen asks us is, what is the most appropriate thing to do right now? If we can just do the most appropriate thing right now, everything is taken care of. Right? This is the idea of Wu Wei. It's just being there. And Dogen is telling us the best way to achieve this is to practice quietude, is to go to some place away from crowds. And I think there's some wisdom in this because when I go to Tokyo, and I'm often seduced, not often seduced, I am sometimes seduced into going to Tokyo to see an art show or to see something or somebody or someone. And I go to Tokyo, and when I first get there, I'm like, and then after like about 30 hours, I'm like, I have to get out of here. I can't stand it. There's, 38.4 million people, and you can feel each and every one of them. It's very intense. So there's something about being quiet. But Hakuin, who's a Rinzai teacher, Hakuin insisted that it's easy to practice quietude as a hermit. So if you have a thatched house somewhere in the field and nice fence and some chickens and nobody's around, it's easy to practice quietude. But to Hakuin, the real art of practicing quietude is to be able to do it in a big city. Is to be able to maintain that center of stillness and let all that stuff rush around you, right? And I think that we've all felt that in moments of stress and tension, certain situations social and otherwise, where we just really wanted to just hold on to that quiet center and let the rest of that function around you. So this is the practice of quietude, not doing and managing with effortlessness. And Hakuin's Butoh fu for this. So imagine this, just deep in the mountains, deep, deep in the mountains. Like this is like one of those red pine stories where he goes off to see the hermit and they climb and they climb and they cross gorges and people point this way and people point this way and they climb and they climb and they cross gorges and people point this way and they never get there. Deep in the mountains, so deep that nobody can find you if you don't want to be found. Deep in the mountains, I sit alone in my hut. Bamboo shadows flicker across my robe. I hum a poem no one will hear. This is one way of practicing quietude. The other Butoh fu for this from Ryokan is Tomate. Truly, I love this life of seclusion. Carrying my staff, I walk toward a friend's cottage. The trees in his garden, soaked by the evening rain, reflect the cool, clear autumnal sky. The owner's dog comes to me. Chrysanthemums bloom along the fence. These people have the same spirit as the ancients. An earthen wall marks their separation from the world. In the house, volumes of poetry are piled on the floor. Abandoning worldliness, I often come to this tranquil place. The spirit here is the spirit of Zen. You know? So I'm not suggesting that you all have piles of poetry on your floor, but if you do have piles of poetry and too much, I'll leave you my address. But this idea of developing quietude, and this is what I mean about Butoh. Ryokan is not living in a monastery. He's not reading sutras. He's not doing any of that. He's dancing with this in real time. And this is what Dogen is encouraging us to do, is to dance with these ideas in real time. Because everybody's dance, like every Butoh performance, will be unique. And this is what the cosmos is asking of us, is for you to manifest you in your own dance. The next, the fourth practice is called diligent practice. Well, we can call it diligence, or, we might call it right effort. Dogen says, monks, if you make diligent effort, nothing is too difficult. It is like a thread of water piercing through a rock by constantly dripping. So this is the idea of water. Until the rock is pierced. And you'll see this sometimes in Japanese gardens, rocks that have been sitting there with water dripping on them for hundreds of years. So the Butoh fu for this is really beautiful. I love this. Morning and night, I sweep the floor. Though no one ever visits, who am I sweeping for? I don't know. Right? This is diligent effort. This is the idea that when you go into a situation that is not your responsibility, and you discover that it's a mess, and you just clean it up because it's a mess. I used to go for walks with my teacher along the road, and she would always stop and pick up trash. It's diligent effort that we get up and we line up our shoes in a certain kind of way. Like my daughter at home, I spent 6 years living in a monastery, so I'm used to a fridge with a fridge map where everything goes in the same place all the time. So, my daughter, her idea of putting something away is if it's a cupboard, it's got a door, it's good enough. And when I say, well, that doesn't go there, she goes, who cares? Kind of a different Ryokan, but who cares, But it's just making this diligent effort for the people who come behind us. It's just practicing for the sake of practicing, not for an outcome, not for anything, but just practicing. Because it's the practice that changes us. That's so if you're sweeping and you don't know who for, that's perfect tofu. When you find yourself doing something kind and ask yourself, why am I spending time doing this? That's your Butoh. Just practice. The fifth one is called maintaining right mindfulness. Dogen says, you should always concentrate your thoughts on being mindful. If one's mindfulness is firm and strong, one will not be harmed even amongst the bandits of the five desires. So Ryokan's Butoh for this is, I meant to meditate, but instead I picked violets beside the path. So he was going to meditate, but instead of that, he saw these violets. So he went out and picked these violets. And this is perfectly, completely mindfully. I mean, to bend and pick a flower with full presence, is that not zazen? To twirl a flower and smile, is that not mind-to-mind transmission? In the dance of Ryokan, zazen is never left on the cushion. So by maintaining mindfulness, we carry practice with us everywhere. The sixth one is the practice of zazen, or the cultivation of samadhi. Dogen says, it is like a household properly protecting its water supply by properly maintaining its banks. Practitioners are like this. For the sake of the water of wisdom, they practice meditation. So this is what I always say, the backbone of this wonderful creature that is upaya, is the 3 sittings a day, and then the evening sit that the residents do on their own. This is the backbone of this whole place. And Ryokan says, sitting quietly, the wind through the pines enters me, and I disappear into the sound. That's pure Butoh. Sitting quietly, the wind through the pines enters me, and I disappear into the sound. The next one is wisdom. Wisdom, Dogen teaches us, wisdom which arises as a result of having heard, considered, and practiced the Dharma produces innumerable benefits to advance oneself in the way. So I think that, to hear, consider, and practice the Dharma. Hear, consider, and practice. That doesn't mean to hear and ignore it. That doesn't mean to hear it and accept it blindly. Right? It means to hear it, consider it, and practice it. Buddha said, be a lamp unto yourself. Try for yourself. If this thing is wholesome, continue to do it. If it is unwholesome, cease doing it. This is wisdom, to do what is wholesome and to cease what is unwholesome. Ryokan says, at the roadside, I stopped and watched a frog leap into the stream, and I forgot everything I ever learned. At the roadside, I stopped and watched a frog. Watched the frog leap into the stream, and suddenly I forgot all I ever learned. Knowledge, position, all of it, everything. Poof! The true man of no rank, just pure presence. Dogen would say, this is a very famous line from Dogen, Dogen would say, to study the self is to forget the self. Ryokan would say, Basho would say, the frog would say, ribbit. It's all the same. The eighth one, this is one I personally struggle with all the time, which is no idle talk. And Dogen warns us, he says, frivolous speech clouds the mind and prevents even monks from attaining enlightenment. This is like from Eihei Dogen, a big warning. Because when Dogen's writing this, he's thinking that if you become a monk, it'll be so much easier for you to attain the way than if you're a practitioner at home, because you have so many responsibilities as a practitioner at home that you don't have as a monk, right? So if you can devote all of your time to the Dharma, you have like maybe a little bit more, bit of an edge to capture, to actually break through and see through the meaning of life and death itself and see into the truth of all things. But he says, even if you do that and you engage in all this idle talk, not going to happen. This is a warning. This is like, science. Ryokan's Butoh for this is, year after year, I have said nothing, and yet the wind and the birds understand me. Year after year, I have said nothing, yet the wind and the birds understand me. So that too is perfect Butoh. So on this, I want to tell a story about Ryokan, about idle talk, and about just the necessity of what needs to be said and how little needs to be said and what needs to be done. So Ryokan came from a merchant family, and he didn't want to do that. That's why he became a monk. And but his family was still in a merchant family, and he had a nephew. And the nephew, was married and had children, and had a business and all of these good things going on. But he was unfortunately kind of gave himself over to what would we say today? Frat boy behavior. So, he would go out and he would drink sake, excess, and he would wake up the next morning and not be in such great condition to take care of the business. He would come home drunk and he would, yell at his wife and scare his children. He'd stay out late, drinking with, women he shouldn't be drinking with and guys he shouldn't be drinking with. And he's just, no matter what anybody said to him, he was just on a tear. He was just on a tear. He was one line over the line all the time. And so the family went to Ryokan and said, we really need help. Can you come and do an intervention? I guess they would say back then. I mean, they would say no, not back then, an intervention. So Ryokan went over and he spent the night at the house and he had dinner with the family. And he didn't mention anything about his nephew's behavior at all. And the next morning, he was about to leave. And in Japan, there's very polite ways to leave. Like if someone comes, someone gets into a car and goes away, we wait till the car is out of sight, bowing. So, I mean, this is what we do today. So, he was leaving, so his nephew came down, and Ryokan looked at him and said, listen, I'm getting really old and it's really hard to tie my sandals. Could you help me tie my sandals? And so the nephew bent down to tie up Ryokan's sandals, and Ryokan started to cry. And the teardrops fell on his nephew's hands. And the nephew felt Ryokan's sadness at his behavior. And he went and turned his life around. No words, no condemnation, just heart-to-heart transmission. I love you. I'm concerned for you. You're hurting everybody. And he felt it. This is the appropriate thing in the appropriate moment. In Boy Scouts, they have a saying, you should do a good deed every day, but it's only a good deed if you don't tell anybody about it. This is one of the lessons I learned when I was young. No, that's not true. It's one of the lessons I was taught when I was young. I didn't actually learn it. And the reason that I know that is I was on a pilgrimage with Kazuwaku Tanahashi, and I found myself in a situation which I found to be utterly distressing. And so I took action, and I did what I thought was right. And later, I told Kaz about it. And Kaz looked at me and said, I would have done the same thing. but I wouldn't have told anybody about it. And you think about it, it's like, what little part of your ego has to be thanked for doing the right thing? And this is why Dogen warns us about idle talk. Because in so many ways, idle talk can cut us off from the path of enlightened activity. Right? I don't believe in enlightenment because I don't believe in anything static. I believe in permanence. Everything is constantly changing. But I deeply believe in enlightened activity. I think that is the reason that we practice the Buddha Dharma, so that we can manifest enlightened activity and be of service to other people. But how can we possibly be of service to other people if we're always thinking about how good it makes us look? It's not what it's about, right? Criticizing people is not what it's about. If we practice right speech, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it beneficial? Is it the right time and place? Can they hear it? If we have to say yes to all 5 of those things, and then ask ourselves 5 times before we speak, a lot of what we say, we would never say, right? So we should be cautious about how we speak. And so this is the warning from Dogen. But the promise from the Butoh of Ryokan is, year after year, I have said nothing, and yet the wind and the birds understand me. There is no need to say anything. You will be understood, just like Ryokan was understood. And then lastly, because we're out of time, and because it's the last thing I got, we started with a favorite poem from one of my teacher's favorite poems that my father-in-law gave my wife. And now we're going to end with my father-in-law's favorite poem from Ryokan. And this is the Butoh I want to leave with you. So if you're going to go practice Dharma Butoh this week, this is your choreography. With no mind. With no mind, blossoms invite the butterflies. With no mind, the butterflies visit the blossoms. When the flower blooms, the butterfly comes. When the butterfly comes, the flower blooms. I do not know others. Others do not know me. Not knowing each other, we naturally follow the way. Please dance this every day.